Let's now focus on internal character animation through motion and shape tweens to design an animated movement cycle. The first thing we need to do for any sort of motion inside Animate CC is to extend our frames. Right now, we only have one frame in our timeline, and this is actually a playhead indicator right here, this red line and red box, showing us the current frame of the playhead. Since we only have one frame right now, no animation is possible. Let's go ahead and click and drag across all of these frames at frame 12, spanning every one of these layers. You can tell they're selected because they're highlighted in this orange-yellow color here. We'll go ahead and choose Insert, Timeline, Frame. As soon as we do that, you'll notice that we have all of these gray frames going up to frame 12, and we're actually able to scrub the playhead. Down at the bottom here, we can even see which particular frame we're at. So, for instance, this is frame 8, and we go all the way to frame 12. The next thing we'll want to do is just make a selection that's very similar to what we just did, but this time across all these active frames. It doesn't matter how many of these frames in each layer that we select, just that we have them all selected. What we're going to do is apply a motion tween to each of these layers. So to do that, choose Insert, Motion Tween. Notice as soon as I do that, a number of things happen visually to the timeline and the different layers. For one thing, all of the different layers, since they have a motion tween applied, now show up as this blue color. In addition, the icon for each layer changes to indicate that we're using a motion tween. You will have noticed by now that on frame 1, we have this filled circle. This indicates that there's content on each of these layers, and it's also an indicator of a keyframe. The initial frame is always going to be a keyframe. A keyframe differs from all of these other frames in that a keyframe specifies a set of properties for the object. In the case of frame 1, it's the simple default properties that we already have. However, if I change the properties in an additional keyframe, what that will do is actually change the different properties across time and potentially cause motion across those other frames between the keyframes. So what we want to make sure of before we do any sort of animation, since this is a looping animation cycle for our character, we want frame 1 and frame 12 to have the exact same properties. To do that, let's simply click and drag again across frame 12 on every one of these layers. Go up to Insert, Timeline, Keyframe. Now if we scrub back a little bit, you'll notice that instead of the type of keyframe we have on frame 1, which is indicated by a filled circle, on frame 12, we actually have a keyframe that is a small black diamond. This indicates a change in properties. What we've basically done here, though, is simply replicate the properties on frame 1. What this allows us to do is go over to frame 6 and make our adjustments to the different properties of each movie clip symbol instance, causing animation from frame 1 to 6 and from frame 6 to 12. So let's go ahead and do that right now. The first thing we'll want to do is select the body, both arms, and this leg right here, the right leg. He's going to need to sort of pump, so his entire body is going to shift downward for that. You'll notice down below that we now have a keyframe that was automatically created on frame 6 for each one of the layers that's affected. Our left leg was not selected, it was not moved, therefore a keyframe does not appear on that layer. For the remainder of our animation, let's choose our free transform tool, and we can just click anywhere on the stage to disable those selections. And what we'll want to do is start off with our right leg. You'll notice this white circle here. This is the transform point. And any transforms that we do to the leg are going to revolve around this point. What we'll be doing is actually rotating the leg, and we don't want it to rotate from the center. We want it to rotate from the hip. So all we need to do is click and drag to move that transform point onto the apple's hip. Then as I hover over any of the corners, my cursor changes into a rotation indicator. All I need to do is click and drag, and you can see that we rotate around the transform point, which is now at his hip. Let's go ahead and select the right arm, and once again, move that transform point to his shoulder. Hovering near any of the corners will produce the rotation icon, which allows us to click and drag to do a little bit of rotation. We'll do the same exact thing to his left arm. And if we want to preview this, all we need to do is drag our playhead. The last thing I'll do is select the left leg and simply shift it over a little bit with my arrow keys. Just the slightest amount. There we go. It just adds a bit more realism to the character movement. So at this point, the movement cycle is generally complete. However, he does have this leaf up here, which is kind of like hair, and you would think that it would be flapping in the breeze as he moves forward. So let's go ahead and choose our selection tool again. And choosing the body, double-click to enter the body movie clip symbol within our character symbol on the main stage. What we'll want to do is deselect everything else by simply clicking on the stage anywhere, and then choosing, with the selection tool, this one particular shape. Going up top, we'll hit Edit, and we want to cut. That removes the shape from our stage altogether. Let's lock down layer 1, create a new layer, and name that layer Leaf. Let's also go ahead and rename layer 1 to Body. Choosing our leaf layer, once again go Edit. Instead of simply pasting, we're going to paste in place. It's going to paste it at the same exact coordinates that we cut it from. Now, the body movie clip symbol here only has one frame as well, so we can't have any animation yet. However, if we go and add some additional frames by selecting frame 6 across both the body and the leaf layer, and choosing Insert, Timeline, Frame, that's going to allow us to move the playhead across those frames. Since this is a shape, we can actually use what's known as a shape tween here. And doing that, it allows us to do some basic animation to the shape without having to turn it into a movie clip symbol. So selecting anywhere on this span of frames, we can go up to Insert and choose Shape Tween. You'll notice that Shape Tween looks a bit different than Motion Tween did. For one thing, it's got a green background, and additionally, what we see here with this dot pattern is a broken tween. Nothing's going to animate right now, because with a shape tween, you need to insert explicit keyframes. Unlike a motion tween, where you can just tweak the properties on the stage and keyframes are inserted for you. So let's go ahead and choose frame 3, Insert, Timeline, Keyframe, and we'll choose frame 6 as well. Insert, Timeline, Keyframe. You'll notice we now have these little arrows instead of the broken line. However, the properties across these keyframes are all the same, so we have no motion yet. Let's go ahead and choose our leaf on frame 3 here. And using, once again, the Free Transform tool, let's move our transform point over to the corner, and we'll shift that up a little bit. If you find it difficult to take control of the transform point on this small leaf object, I suggest you zoom in a bit, and then zoom back out when you're done. You can see that automatically we have this little waving motion here, which looks just perfect. Let's go back out to Scene 1 by clicking on Scene 1 up here, and at this point we can once again choose File, Save, before moving on with our project.